So here I have a Tectonics electric piano. It's not working. I'll be seeing what I can do. First, I'm going to test out that it's getting power at the back. Yeah. So here I have it plugged in on the AC adapter. Hit the power button. And it doesn't show anything. So that could be... Now we just have to diagnose the power. It could be a bad fuse or something. We're going to have to use, I think it has these back screws that we unscrew and maybe it has a fuse inside. All right. So let's take off the screws. This is the thought process that this is the main power, so the board doesn't have power. So what we're going to do is there's a fuse. We'll test that fuse and make sure that we're getting power to here. Then it looks like we have a transformer here that reduces the voltage, and then it goes from this board. It goes to the main power. So we're going to test out the power on this board. And then there'll be a DC rectifier. So we got the multimeter here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to test this fuse to make sure that the fuse is good. So that fuse is good. Now what we're going to do is we'll plug it in and we'll test the AC voltage. So we set it to 200 volts AC. And then we're going to plug it in at the bottom here. Could be a bad cable. So we got it plugged in, and coming from this to the transformer, I'm not measuring anything. So let's just test this cable. So I'm getting 120 volts at the cable. The cable is okay. So this board so it's these two other pins. Let's measure the voltage here, and right there you can see that I'm not getting anything. So something's to do with this board. Well, let's take off this too. Let me measure that. Could be a bad pin connection or something. So let's measure here. So this, I'm measuring 0. Let's go into DC volts. Maybe it's outputting DC here. So there's a problem with this. Okay. So I'm gonna have to cut these and then remove this board. You can just pause the video. So what I'm gonna do is remove this power board, and we'll just have a look at what's going on underneath it. So it just has these two other screws. Okay, that came out pretty easy. Okay, so there's this little tab here that you have to pry out because there's this little lip. So I pried that out on both sides, and that takes out this board. Now, we can actually see what's going on. So the two power lines are coming into here, and then it's going through an inductor. On the, if you can just zoom in there, you can see that we have these numbers. And on the silt, or the mask there, it says L1. So this guy is an inductor, and this is a high capacitance capacitor, and this is also a capacitor. So what we can do is just measure the voltage across right here and here, because that should measure 0, because that's an inductor. So let's go into continuity, the diode mode. Okay, good. So we have solid voltage there. So that inductor is okay. And then, so the AC goes to this right here. So we should measure the AC on that, no problem, from this joint. And then we should measure AC on this. Now I'm just gonna have a look. Sometimes there's cracks on these joints. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna heat up these just in case. I'm gonna put some solder there. Okay, you can just like what I'm soldering. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna resolder these joints, because sometimes they have hairline fractures that you can't see with your eyeball. And so from heating and cooling, sometimes these joints get bad. So I'm just resoldering these points. So that's the power. It is a power issue. So, and the board is very old, right? And then I'm going to resolder these as much as I can. I had one board that had bad joints, and that was the problem. So I just resoldered that, and I stripped a little bit just to make sure that those two are good. Just so that yeah, you can see on the multimeter there, we got a good contact there. Okay, so now let's go back to measuring the voltage. So I'm gonna turn to AC voltage. Just be careful that you touch the outside of the board, not the contacts. Alright. So measuring from here to here, I don't get anything. Okay, if I push really hard, it's just a contact problem. Just need to get good contact here. So, if I measure from here to here, okay, we're good. Now let's go on the other side of that capacitor. And I don't get anything. The only thing that is going Let me think here.
Unplug it.
Just a second. Let me measure the voltage here. Nothing there. Nothing there. So I'm thinking one of the capacitors is bad. So we know our inductor's okay. This capacitor maybe is broken. Okay, let's take a photo. So I have some of the replacement parts for this power board, and basically we have a 0.1 nanofarad capacitor that I'm going to be putting in here, and I'm going to also be replacing this capacitor. I think that the capacitors may be okay, but we'll have a try to see if this works. You never know. So these are through-hole components. Here's 10-4J rated at 400 volts. This is just going to help regulate the power. So I'm just going to bend the legs so they can fit in like so. Okay. And then we'll just heat it up, solder it in. Okay, got one leg in. And the second one. There we go. Got in that capacitor. We'll just put it in as much as we can. Okay, and then I'll just get those joints there. Got that in. Then we'll just break the leads that are sticking out. Yeah, so I'm just back visiting from China. I'm teaching there. I don't really repair right now locally, but this customer said he's an older gentleman and he had this antique piano and he didn't want to get rid of it. So I said I'd have a look at it. Can't make any promises, but it's it's always good to fix stuff if they can. So I just basically am charging for the parts. Got the parts today, and I'm going to replace these two capacitors on the power supply board because it doesn't turn on at all. So it could be a power supply issue, or I'm thinking it could be the main CPU. If it's the main CPU, I think we're out of luck. But if these capacitors fix it to stabilize the voltage and whatnot, that would be great. Because sometimes capacitors can act like a surge protection, and maybe there was a surge and blew the capacitor. Because these capacitors help to regulate the voltage. There we go. Put that one in, and then we'll just solder it up here. All right. It's really hot these summer days. I'm just working in my dad's garage. Okay, basically. So I'm just going to explain how this board works, because on the back, basically, it comes through these 2 points are inductor, and then this right here is the power switch. The power switch connects that to that. And then you have these capacitors that are along the main power rail from that contact switch. And then you have the other long capacitor from here to here. So when the power comes to here, it flows through this fuse, and then the main AC voltage will be these two contacts right here, which are these. These two are open. There we go. So I'm going to be putting this back into the piano, and we'll see if we can get some light. So got the board back in, and then we just have 2 screws. That holds in the power board here. Alright, there we go. So I'm going to plug it in, test it, the power, and we'll see if we get the lights. Have everything in there. We'll just hit the power button. Have the power on, but we still don't have any lights. And I did notice that this Tectonics microchip is getting warm. So we can measure the voltage. So now we're getting voltage. So we'll just measure DC volts. And let me just. And we're measuring 27 volts. And that is stable. And so the board is getting voltage, but I do feel that this board is the issue. It's heating up. Just disconnected it there. Measures 28 volts. So it's bad CPU. Unfortunately, they don't make those CPUs. Yep, none of the buttons are working. So unfortunately I cannot fix this, but we gave it a good attempt.